What theme are we looking for?
Welcome everyone to our immigrant voting strategy session. Woohoo! I know it's early, but you made it! My name is Annette Wong, and I am the Managing Director of Programs at Chinese for Affirmative Action. We are here to talk about our vision for immigrant voting, municipal voting, local voting, EDU voting, whatever you want to call it. This is what we're here for. So we're very excited to have the city attorney here, and if you'll help me welcome him up with a big round of applause.
So as Annette mentioned, this is an issue that I have been working on for the better part of 20 years. I've been asked to share the story, really, of San Francisco's struggle for non-citizen voting. It was election night, November 2016. Everyone remember that night? Right? So as we're celebrating that non-citizen voting has passed, we're looking at CNN and realizing that if non-citizen votes started in San Francisco, that we would immediately become targets of the Trump administration. So we decided, really, frankly, to mute the implementation of what we were doing, and sort of keep it quiet, and to see what happened.
我認識我一個好好嘅朋友啦，佢叫婉婉。咁我哋咁啱咧，佢就同我講，我好記得應該係2016年嘅。咁嗰陣時 enter 我咧就關於一個非公民家長投票嘅，覺得好奇怪，因為我從社區了解過，因為嚟到美國要投票要公民先投得㗎，唔係公民咩？咁當時我咁問佢。票啊，咁我當時就問佢，咁佢話你係咪有一個小朋友喺聯合校區讀書啊？我話係啊，咁佢話你非公民家長都係可以投校區委員會嘅票啊，嗰啲校區委員會咧會決定你嘅小朋友即係校區嗰啲運作啊，好似而家佢哋啲撥款啊，佢哋嗰啲課程啊、決策啊。咁我當時聽到，我覺得都係應該，因為我哋點講咧？我哋嚟到美國非公民成為公民都要一段時間，好似我先生咁係綠卡，咁我要爭取入籍嘅話咧，我要4年9個月先去遞表申請入籍，咁嗰個時間係好長。但我小朋友又喺校區入邊讀書嗰段時間，我個小朋友嘅權利係應該去爭取嘅，唔理佢嚟到美國係幾耐，因為佢係代表我哋所有個學生，佢唔係代表單一嘅公民學生。
Initially, in the United States, only white men with property could vote, but it said nothing about citizenship. Between 1776 and 1920, 40 states at some point in time allowed immigrants to vote. As the number of immigrants grew and as the composition of the immigrants coming to the United States shifted from Western Europe and Northern Europe to Southern and Eastern Europe, as well as China and Mexico, the conflict over who is an American and what's America increasingly became contentious. Some of the groups that were agitating for immigration restriction or voting rights restriction were nativist groups, were Ku Klux Klan, the Know Nothing Party in the 1840s, 1850s, and in state courts time after time and the federal courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, ruled that immigrant voting was legal. So immigrants have been able to vote legally for local, state, and federal elections until the 1996 federal legislation that was passed that explicitly bars immigrants from voting in federal elections. It doesn't say anything about state and local elections.
For a lot of folks who, study the civil rights say that, there was voting in America up until the passage of the Voting Rights Act. America was not truly a democracy. I want us always to recognize the real vision of the civil rights and those leaders in that civil rights movement. They weren't just fighting for, civil rights for black folks, but at that point, increasing the electorate regardless of the demographics. Coming from New York, we ran a successful campaign called Our City, Our Vote, and that expanded the voting rolls in New York City by 1 million individuals. It was the largest expansion of voting rights that we had seen in this country since the 60s.
There's one challenge that I want to ask you about. In Santa Ana, it's been challenging working with city staff whose values don't align with ours, so sometimes they make it more difficult, or sometimes they will not implement it at all and just use bureaucracy or as a way of delaying it. So How have you just have a good relationship from the get-go?
We do.
Yes.
That's the beauty of San Francisco.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the beauty of San Francisco. We target those people that's going to help us, that's going to support us, and we know them already. San Francisco, they're all trying to do their best to show that, okay, I'm pro-immigrant, let's be honest. So this is the biggest advantage we have here.
I think it's already been mentioned in other presentations, the possibility of there being legal challenges for this work. So I think it's really informational for all these other groups considering it to see what San Francisco's done and what the roadblocks have been and how we're pivoting.
Welcome everybody. How's everybody feeling? Thank you for being here.
I'm speaking here today because the court will soon be hearing the case, Lacey versus City and County of San Francisco, challenging non-citizen parents' rights to vote in the school board elections. If this lawsuit succeeds, my ability to advocate for my child's education needs will be taken away.
Esta demanda es una violación de derechos.
This lawsuit violates our rights.
Y ataca a más de 10 años de trabajo en donde yo he estado involucrada.
And it directly attacks more than a decade of work that I've been involved in.
San Francisco must take a stand to protect and expand voting rights, particularly as we see attacks on voting all across the country. This is not an isolated incident.
I got a text message from a legislative aide with Supervisor Connie Chan's office, and she said, did you hear about the lawsuit? And I just said, oh no. I knew exactly what she was talking about. I wasn't completely surprised, but I was a little bit like, oh gosh, here we go. I think when we first heard that there was this lawsuit, I felt very optimistic, actually. And perhaps it's because I had surrounded myself with people that also felt optimistic. So, I had heard analyses from attorneys, from academics, from people who are steeped in and experts in immigrant voting, and they all felt like, oh, no problem. It felt like such a sure thing, as we were going into the hearing. So then we heard that we lost at the trial court level. It felt like, oh gosh, maybe we are in trouble. Maybe we do need to start thinking about other alternatives.
Judge Ulmer issued an injunction that said potentially that the law was unconstitutional. We are about to go to court to argue this case in front of the Court of Appeals. So one of the ambiguities here that's at issue is this provision in Article 2, Section 2 that says a U.S. citizen may vote. The opposition says that language should be interpreted to suggest that only a U.S. citizen may vote. They're relying on an 1898 case, the Spear case, when the California Constitution was literally looked very different from how it looks today. In fact, the very provisions that we're talking about during that time period stated that if you were a Chinese national, if you were, and this is a language from the Constitution at the time, if you were an idiot or an insane person, if you had a prison record, you could not vote. And there was language that forbade certain individuals from voting. All that language got stripped out through a dozen amendments to the California Constitution since that time period, such that today, all the language says is a U.S. citizen may vote. Since that ballot measure passed in 2016, there's really been no public debate suggesting that we ought to reverse that. And the idea that it is an out of, this is an organization that's not rooted here in our city, that has come into our town after our voters said definitively what they wanted to allow at the ballot box, feels very undemocratic and something that we are fighting to the hilt.
Your construction of Article 2 is that the Constitution allows only citizens to vote. How then do you explain the 1926 amendment that also excludes aliens ineligible for citizenship? That would seem to be totally redundant. You wouldn't need to say that if, in fact, only citizens can vote. So why would they put that in there?
Short answer is I don't know. The 1972 amendment, which created Article 2, Section 2 in its current form, is best construed as ratifying the historical practice of limiting it to United States citizens.
But you can see why that what was true in 1926 is very important, because if we conclude that the 72 amendment was designed to preserve what was true already, then, well, what was true already was what was written in 1926 as modified by Supreme Court decisions throwing out certain pieces of the 26 thing. Wow, that sounds like a pretty gaping hole in your theory that 72 not only just preserved what was true, but preserved a bar on the legislature enacting a non-citizens can vote provision.
Another explanation for that is, modernly there's a movement, Plain English for Lawyers, and the 1972 amendment cleaned up the superfluous language and made it nice and simple and set the floor and the ceiling of who is entitled to vote in the state.
Okay, well, Mr. Morgan, your time is up. Thank you very much.
To respond to the points raised by Respondents' Counsel, this is a measure that really is of significant interest to San Franciscans and no significant interest to anybody else.
So, and those are the very arguments that we used.
High five! I know, I read the decision.
Article 2,
I was
Section
like,
2.
no.
Right.
So thank you all for gathering. We're here to celebrate a very important victory on immigrant voting. I think even navigating the lawsuit situation, we learned that there's so much that we can learn and achieve together just through battling lawsuits together. So one of you that's in the room today is here because you have played a crucial role over the last several decades. Santa Ana just launched their campaign to push for this initiative. Places like Richmond, California, San Jose, Fresno, Long Beach, Pasadena, Los Angeles. There are advocates in those areas that are all seriously considering immigrant voting and at different points in the process of moving that forward. In the face of the federal landscape being bleak, I think immigrant voting has become this beacon for a lot of us in the immigrant rights movement as something proactive. It's our offensive play that we can move forward with in the face of really harsh and very terrible policies and decisions that are coming down. So this is all your work. This is all because San Francisco took the initiative, took the risk, and put this out there and made it a reality that has now been solidified by the courts. That's some of the kind of broader work ahead for CAA, multiple levels and lots of engagement from the grassroots all the way to national kind of coalition building.